What's up guys, my name is Liam, and today we're going to be taking a look at the FreeFall Manufacturing Group SV Base Control Plus gaming mousepad. This is actually quite unique from anything else I've tried on the market. However, is this going to be the perfect gaming mousepad for you? Let's check it out. Alright guys, and here we got the pad, and just a really quick disclaimer, FreeFall did actually send this out to me, so thank you guys very much for that. However, they didn't tell me anything to say, so everything you see in this video are going to be my truthful, honest thoughts and opinions on this mousepad. So starting out with the colorway, and as you can clearly see here, this thing looks absolutely incredible. I'm a huge fan of teal color, blue colors. Those are generally my first choice when it comes to the mousepads I have on my desk, so I've just been absolutely loving this thing. I'm a little fearful of getting it dirty, so I've been really careful with it and trying to keep it clean, but other than that, I feel like this thing absolutely pops and looks incredible. This arrived to my front door very nicely. It was flat packed and it was wrapped up in a lot of bubble wrap, so very clean. It doesn't necessarily come with any type of a sleeve or anything like that for storage, but obviously if you wanted to hold on to the box and store it in the box that way, that would always be an option for you. One thing that was really surprising to me as I pulled this out of the box is when you hear the term control pads, I'm just always used to stuff similar to kind of like the Artisan FX Zero, and I was just kind of expecting a light and soft pad, but I do want to say that this thing, I was actually really shocked at how heavy it is. It feels really heavy, really solid, really durable, and I would have to say that's a plus because the overall build of this pad just in general, it feels very well put together and very solid. The current dimensions are 450 millimeters in width by 450 millimeters in height, and this pad sits in at 3 millimeters in thickness. And one of the reasons that I believe that this pad feels so solid and rugged is I believe it has something to do with the base, which consists of a silicone base, and that's truly what it feels like. There's some other materials in here, but overall it just has that rubberized feeling and it truly feels really good. It's nice and sticky and smooth. And let me tell you guys, when you put this thing on the desk, I never had a single issue where I had this pad move on me. I was being forceful with it and I was really trying to get it to go. Now the good thing is it's not like pour on, to where pour on, you actually have to peel it off your desk to move it. You can just slightly lift this up and it is pretty easy to move around. But once you seat this thing down, again, it's just solid and no problems with it. And as far as the feeling with the base goes, it truly is just really unique. This thing feels like a hard pad almost. It's very solid, very rugged. When you push into this thing, there's literally almost no give. So even though it is flexible, you can bend it around. It is easy to move around. It feels like a hard pad with some type of a polyester or a cloth type surface. And when it comes to the stitching is truly impressive. It sits about the same level as the actual surface itself, but I didn't have any type of issues with the stitching bothering me, getting in my way. I didn't even notice it or even feel that it was there. It feels nice and tight. And then finally, when it comes to the surface, they used a jacquard weave. And the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that was the Artisan Hyate Otsu, because that surface also uses a jacquard weave. And I do want to say that that is honestly, truly almost exactly what the surface feels like. It feels almost identical to the Hyate Otsu in the mid version. However, with that being said, even though the feeling, the overall touch, they're similar to one another, the way that the two pads perform is completely different. And this pad is actually really unique. If you've ever used the Artisan Hyate Otsu, you'll know that the surface, it is a bit rougher. It is more abrasive. Now I would say that they feel about equally as abrasive as one another. I feel like the Hyate Otsu is just a tad bit more abrasive for whatever reason. I'm not sure if the stitching is more tight on this or something like that, but I would definitely say that this is a little bit more on the abrasive category. Personally, I'm used to pads like this, so for me, I don't have any issues with it. But if you are somebody who is sensitive with rubbing your skin across the pad, then maybe something you can take into consideration if you're looking to pick this up. I don't feel like this is as abrasive or scratchy as the Hyate. It is just a step below that, but overall it is just a little bit on the scratchier side. Again, not an issue for me at all, but just something I wanted you guys to be aware of. And when it comes to the overall characteristics about how this thing performs and how it feels, honestly, the initial static friction, there is a little bit there. It's not too bad. The fact that this pad is so tight and it feels so solid, I would say the number one thing that stood out to me about this pad is it is incredibly consistent. I live in a really humid environment, and this thing has just performed through and through from start to finish of using it. No matter what time it is in the day or anything like that, it just feels solid and it always feels the same. So it was really nice to know that you always know what you're getting or always know what to expect when you're using it. So the characteristics is that it has a little bit of initial static friction. It's not bad. It's about on level with something like the Artisan FX Zero. And then overall, when it comes to the glide, one of the reasons I feel like this is so unique is I feel like it does offer a really quick glide, but but at the same time, it's incredibly controlled. And I do feel like the glide on this pad, as you're swiping, it is a little bit more controlled than some pads that classify as a controlled pad, and we'll get into that in more detail here in just a minute. But I wouldn't say it is as controlled as something like the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro. And as you're coming across your glide to the stop, I never had any issues with the stopping power. It plays great, and you truly can stop on a dime with it. It doesn't have as great a stopping power as some of the softer control pads out there, but I would say for something with the glide, speed, and consistency that you are getting here, that it does have really good controlled stopping power. And while I was testing it out with the different types of mice and skates that are out there on the market, I did definitely feel like something like the G Pro Superlight, when you do have bigger skates, it overall does give you greater stopping power, more control, and just a little bit of a slower glide overall. Testing it out with something like the G-Wolves HTX, it did feel a little bit faster, a little smoother, and overall just gives you a little bit of a quicker glide with all the same properties. And I did feel like using these smaller dot type skates on here, again, you do get a little bit of an overall quicker glide. Again, you still get the great control, you still get the stopping power, all the good things. But I do feel like the smaller skates, with whether you're using the HTX or the Lamzu Atlantis Mini, honestly, these two mice felt pretty similar on this pad. And if you're someone that uses the Sapphire skates or the Pulsar Superglide V1s or any other type of smoother feeling glass skates, you honestly get a really smooth and consistent glide on this pad. I feel like both these skates work really well on here. You do get a little bit of lower of the initial static friction, and it does have a bit of a quicker glide, but I still feel like that you do get a pretty decent amount of stopping power with the glass skates, and obviously with the Sapphire skates, you do get a little bit more control and a little bit greater stopping power than the traditional glass skates. But overall, these both performed great on this pad as well. And then last but not least, one of the most unique experiences that I did have was using the Pulsar Superglides, the V2. These are more of controlled style glass skates. And it's honestly pretty insane the amount of control and stopping power that you got in combination with this pad and these skates. Maybe not such a big fan if you're playing a game like Apex Legends or something like that. It did make really quick tracking going back and forth up close a bit harder to do, but I will tell you that when it comes to flicks, I did test this out playing games like Valorant, and just when you're doing those quick flick shots, the amount of control and stopping power you get with this combination was just absolutely insane. And it was one of the most unique experiences that I've ever used before. I don't think I've ever used a setup before to where you get such a fast and smooth glide with some of the most insane stopping power ever. I mean, this thing just stops on a dime. All right, so first off, let's go ahead and drop the SV Base Control Plus up against the Hyate Otsu in mid. Now I'll go ahead and drop some images of a close-up of what the actual material and the surface of these pads look like against one another. But again, these things feel nearly identical when it comes to the overall touch of these pads. When it comes to the characteristics, I definitely feel like the Hyate Otsu, it has less initial static friction. It's a bit slipperier feeling. It has way less control on the glide, and overall the glide is just a lot faster. Whereas on this pad, you have a bit more of the static friction. It gives you a way more controlled glide. And I mean, you can just see the difference there. This is absolutely more like a speed pad. And though I wouldn't necessarily label this purely a control pad, it does kind of have some characteristics of a speed pad. Compared to the Hyate Otsu in mid, this thing is much more controlled. And when it comes to the mid base on the Artisan, you can actually push into it. It is very firm. But again, the SV Base Control Plus, this thing is much more solid. And then next up, when comparing it to the Artisan FX Zero, this is actually the xSoft version in the dyed orange colorway. These two are truly pretty close to one another when it comes to performance. I would say that the SV Base Control Plus has a little bit more of an initial static friction. It feels like you have a little bit more control down in your micro adjustments. And one of the biggest differences between these two is I feel like overall the speed of these pads are very similar to one another, but I feel like you get much more control with the Control Plus over the Artisan FX Zero. I do feel like the Artisan FX Zero, the surface of it is just a bit slipperier when you're trying to do these little micro adjustments or these little micro movements. However, the one thing I do think that the Artisan FX Zero has over this pad is I do feel like it has a little greater stopping power, probably just due to the fact that it is a softer pad, and when I do stop, I like to push into it. If you were just to push these and let them glide, you know, they're honestly, if you were just to let these glide, this one might feel like it has a little more stopping power if you don't put a lot of pressure into it. But as you can see here, I was testing these out. If I were to push in this pad, It does stop greater. It does give you more control, more stopping power. However, when I push into the FX Zero and come to complete stop, you honestly can't even really move the mouse. These pads are clearly very similar to one another. I just feel like the SV Base Control Plus just has a little bit more of different characteristics from anything that I've ever used before. And the one thing that I do like about the FreeFall pad is I do feel like overall there's a little bit more of inconsistencies in the FX Zero. And I feel like this pad is just a little bit more consistent. All right, and last but not least, another pad that is kind of similar to as far as characteristics go is going to be the Lethal Gaming Gear Venus Pro. I feel like the performance of these pads are pretty similar to one another. To me, the Venus Pro just feels like it has a bit more of a muddier glide, whereas with the FreeFall pad, I feel like it's a little bit of a smoother and faster glide overall. And I do feel like you do get more control with the FreeFall pad. Whereas this one, it just feels, a little bit slower. And like I said, the only real way I can think of is comparing it is it just feels a little stickier, a little muddier. I feel like the micro adjustments on the FreeFall pad is just a little bit easier to make than on the Venus Pro. And these two pads are pretty similar when it comes to stopping power. However, since you can actually push into the Venus Pro, it is a little bit more plush. I guess I could say that the Venus Pro probably has just a little bit better stopping power for me. All right, guys, so that wraps things up for the SV Base Control Plus gaming mouse pad. I truly think this thing is amazing. This is one of the coolest pads that I've used in recent days. I love how this thing feels like you're dealing with a hard pad, but it gives you all the properties of using a polyester or a cloth style gaming pad. If you are a speed pad user, I definitely wouldn't categorize this in the faster type of speed pads. I would definitely say that if you're more of a control pad user or you've used something like the Artisan FX Zero in the past, and the Artisan FX Zero does have a reputation for being a control pad, but being a little bit on the faster side, I would definitely put this in that same category. I feel like one of the strengths of this thing is that it just gives you more consistency, similar to a hard pad. And taking that into consideration with how incredible this looks, how great the build quality on this thing is, and how solid it is, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna have to give this pad a 2 thumbs up. And if you have any interest in this style of a performing gaming mouse pad, I would definitely recommend you guys go and check it out. Right now, you can currently pick this up for $34.99. And at that price, for the quality of a product that you're getting here, I would say that that's an absolute steal in my opinion. All right, guys, so if I left anything out or if you have any additional questions, please let me know down in the comments below. Aside from that, if you did like this video and you're interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.